Morning, Ben.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm all right, mate. Pretty early for you, this, isn't it? We're up and running, filming at 25 to 10.
It's like halfway through the night, really, isn't it?
Yes, there are two 9:30s in a day. And because we needed all our mental and cerebral strength this morning to discuss a subject of great importance.
Absolutely.
That of cleat alignment. Why is it so flipping important?
Well, the most important thing is to optimise performance, really, and also to prevent injury. So these are my shoes. So this is the cleat, which locks into the pedal like that. So I've got the wrong pedal, wrong shoe. But anyway, so the way that we used to align cleats used to be like this. So you have this part here, which is your first metatarsal there.
Yeah.
And the pedal used to fit basically under here, so that the axle was directly under the ball of the foot. But what we ended up finding was that it put a huge amount of strain on the foot of the individual. So now what we do, as you can see, we line the first metatarsal and then the fifth metatarsal, and we try and get the pedal axle directly in the centre of that, sort of between the two, and it does support the foot a lot better. But the way that pros now ride is that, because I'll show you from sort of this side, so that's in effect where it would be. So in between the first and the fifth metatarsal. I don't know if you can see that like that. Is that visible? So,
yeah, it is. Yeah.
So you line the axle between those two lines. Because as you can see, the fifth metatarsal is significantly further back than the first. So we try and get that directly in the middle.
So you're looking at a sort of an average point between the fifth and first metatarsals and a line straight. Because you're not looking to create an angle. You're looking to create a straight line across the foot in between the two metatarsals.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's ideal for most amateur riders, but there is a big push now towards pro riders, particularly, where what they do is they get the sort of the axle as far back as it will possibly go, and then the foot comes in front of the pedal itself, or in front of the pedal axle.
So what's the thinking behind that? Well,
the idea is that if you imagine that you're riding, say, 170 cranks, and then you manage to get your foot maybe 20 to 30 mil further in front of the point when the crank is at the 3 o'clock position, you get a lot more leverage. So in effect, the sole of the shoe acts like like a virtual crank.
So it's extending the length of the crank when it's in the horizontal plane.
Absolutely.
As it is sat there at the moment. So if you indicate where the crank could be just with your finger going backwards.
So it'll be from here to here.
Yeah.
And then the virtual crank would be up to this point here, which is where the ball of the foot, or the ball of the first metatarsal would be.
So if that's what the pros are doing, is that good for everyone?
It's not good for everyone, because it can put quite a bit of pressure on the knees. There's sort of two schools of thinking, really. The first school of thinking is the further back that you get the cleat. I mean, you can never ever injure yourself putting the cleat as far back as it will go, because what it does is it stabilises the foot, which is great, but it doesn't necessarily give you optimal performance.
So it stabilises the foot because it's reducing the distance from your wobbly ankle, yeah?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, but I mean, everyone always concentrates on leverage, so it does that. And there's a big sort of school of thought now where a lot of pros are going shorter cranks, much shorter cranks. So if you imagine at the top of the stroke, you want to keep the hip angle, so this sort of angle here, as large as possible. And obviously, if you've got a crank, even if it's 5 mil more, then the leg comes up that little bit higher.
So you want to keep the hip as open as possible.
As open as possible.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, it means that you can drive harder. So there's lots and lots of studies done on leverage and fulcrum, so the leverage of the hip flexor. So the more open it is, the more power you can get. So by doing that, what you're in effect doing means you can have a shorter crank, but you've got the equivalent of a longer crank at the 3 o'clock position. if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. So you're shortening at the top,
yep,
so that you're keeping that hip flexor open.
That's right.
In is an optimal position up there.
Yeah.
Then you're adding more leverage at the point where you're applying the most power.
Absolutely.
Which makes perfect sense, but just thinking about a lot of the guys that are going to come and see you.
Yeah.
How do you fit cleats of your clients so that they get optimal performance for their needs?
Well, for most of them, the most important thing is to get the cleat as central as possible across the whole foot. That's the most important thing. And by doing that, you do dramatically reduce the amount of injury that you get, and you optimize their efficiency. And the other thing as well, when you bring the cleat too far back, I mean, it's different on every single pair of shoes. The amount of cleat, so it depends on where the manufacturer actually drills the holes. Now, on certain manufacturers, you've got multiple pairs of shoes, they're all going to be different. So where the manufacturer actually puts the holes in relation to the shoe itself is different from manufacturer. It can even be different from actual shoe model to shoe model. So you have 245. And they're drilled in different places, so through quality control or lack of quality control. So you want to try and keep. I always try and sort of have a start point at the central part of the shoe.
So because you've got all that variation in shoes themselves, and obviously people with different size feet, different manufacturers, a good bike fit is going to ensure that it's in the optimal position for you, your shoe, your cleats, your pedals.
Absolutely.
Tell us how you go about doing that with your clients. Where's your starting point?
So I used to use these, which are fantastic, available at all good bike shops. These are about 20 quid, and it just gives me a start position. As you can see, I've found where the first metatarsal is, found where the fifth metatarsal is, and then basically you put your cleat on the bottom of the shoe, and then you line it up here. So you align this part slightly in front of the pedal axle and this part slightly behind. So as you can see, this is the centre of your pedal axle here.
Yeah.
So you have equidistance for the fifth metatarsal and the first, away from the axle and away from the axle this way.
We've talked about before that you do the best you can with the understanding you have at the time.
Yes, absolutely.
And things have moved on an awful lot in recent times to do with cleat position, and also the effect that you can see and measure to do with the forces, not just going forwards and backwards,
yes,
but the forces of instability and with force dropping off the sides of the pedals, if you like.
Well, I used to think I was really, really good at cleat alignment. I used to think I was really spot on about it. And in the last 2 weeks, particularly since I've got the jig, I can now dial it in to within a millimetre. So I can show you that in a sec. And you're right, with the equipment that you have at a given moment in time, you generally tended to do the best that you could based on what you had. And then Shimano brought out this bike fitting jig here, which made life a lot more simple. Very, very clever bit of kit that. And then we have the Shimano bike fitting jig itself.
Well, shall we have a look at that now then?
Yeah, let's do it.